When I was at UTC, the Bible College, United Theological College, we do chapel there regularly. And I remember one time when I was in chapel, I was, it was just attending chapel. And it was around the time when East Timor was trying to get independence from Indonesia, if I remember that right. Yes. And we actually had a lady who was one of my classmates who had done some work in Indonesia, missionary work, and actually particularly had worked with the local churches. And it was just after they declared independence, and then pro-Indonesian forces came through and massacred a whole bunch of people. And she asked, can I do a lament in chapel? Now, I hadn't really experienced somebody saying that before. Can I do a lament? And so the community said, sure. And she just went up the front and knelt at the front of the chapel and started to cry out to God. Tears were streaming down her cheek. She cried out for, the pain that she was feeling, for her friends, crying out to God, why is this happening? Help us. Help us. It was incredibly moving, and that was 22 years ago, and I can still remember it very clearly, this lament. When I first heard the story that we heard today, the line that jumped out to me within that was this sense of there was this new king that had come to town, and a new king for whom Joseph meant nothing came to power in Egypt. Now, you know the story of Joseph, do you? Or do I need to just quickly jump back and remind people of the story of Joseph? Because we're not doing Joseph in our many Old Testament stories. But in brief, Joseph had a very colourful coat, which his brothers didn't like his boasting about it. So they threw him in a well and sold him in slavery, where he went to live at Potiphar's house, went through a whole bunch of stuff there, ended up in jail where he interpreted a few dreams, ended up before the Pharaoh, who he said, this is how to stop your country going into famine and not having enough food, and eventually being given the position, what we would call Prime Minister, second in charge in all of Egypt. And as a result, he invited all his family, his brothers who threw him in the well and sold him to slavery, but the extended family, what we would call the Hebrew people, the Israel nation at the time, invited them all to come down into Egypt and to receive the same blessings as Joseph was getting as second in command. And so everybody moved down there, and they lived down there for many generations, being blessed because of the role that Joseph did in saving Egypt. But how did our reading start today? There was a new king to whom Joseph meant nothing. So obviously time had passed to the point where this new king is saying, I don't know who this Joseph is. I don't want to bless these people. And what was his response to that? He starts to see the Hebrew people as a threat, as someone to be feared. Now, in the reading, there's no indication that that is the case at all. But the king is making that case. What if our enemies attack us and these people side with our enemies? Did they say they were going to do that? No, it's just the king saying this. But he is causing the rest of the Egyptians to turn against this minority group. He was using fear of the unknown, the fear of those who are different, to create divisions. Does this sound familiar? It is something that has happened all throughout history and was certainly happening in this story. Certainly happening in this story. And so what was the response? They made slave masters over them. They forced these people into low-paying or no-paying jobs. Almost to sort of say, you need to remember your place in the hierarchy here. You need to remember where you fit in here. You're down there. And so we'll make you do the jobs that are down there. And how did the Israelites or the Hebrew people respond? They lamented. A little bit like my friend who was lamenting for East Timorese people in that service many years ago. They cried out to God. I can imagine them falling to their knees and tears coming down their cheeks as they cried out, "Help! How long will this go for, God? How long will this go for?" I'm not sure if we really do lament in church, but we're going to try something similar today. As you came in, you've got a whole bunch of, there was a whole bunch of these, and hopefully you might have grabbed one of these as you came in. Just 3 little sheets of paper and a texter. What I'm going to invite you to do, just over the next few minutes, is to think about what is weighing upon your heart. What are the things that when you see causes pain within you to see that? Or when you hear and you go, that is not right. What are the things that are weighing upon your heart? Now, I'm assuming it's going to be different for every one of us. But what are the things that you would like this morning to cry out to God and to say, help? Can you help in these situations? Can you help this person? Can you help? And what I'd like you to do is you can do it in very specific words or abstract words if you don't want to be too specific. Just write it on the sheet of paper. I've given you 3 because I'm assuming you might have more than one. If you only have one, that's fine. And then what I'm going to encourage you to do while we sing the song, I'll give us a few moments to do this first, and then while we're singing the song, is that I'm going to invite you just to come forward and to lay it on the table at the end here. And I may need a few people to help here, look at you, Juliet, we're going to form them into chains as a symbol of how sometimes these things can actually bind us and bind communities and certainly bind the people who it is happening to. And so we're just going to chain them up. So if you wanted to do that while you come up the front, there's sticky tape, there's staples and there's glue sticks, or you can just hand it over to Juliet, who will happily make it into a long chain and lie it all over the table. Got the idea? So let's just use this moment to cry out to God, to think about the things that are weighing upon us, to write it on the sheet and to bring it forward. At some point the band will start playing our second song. Yeah, hopefully the pictures of the chains there sort of have that sense of what the Israelites may have been feeling in Egypt. But then something happened, and we're not going to hear the Bible reading as we move into scene 2, but instead we're going to be reflecting in a different way. This is a long Bible passage, and so I thought I'd do what I do with my scripture kids at school and just tell the story. And you can be part of this. But between the middle part of Exodus chapter 1 through to the middle part of Exodus chapter 2, there is some incredible people who tried to stand up for what was right in this situation. This situation that felt like chains weighing them down. And the first people that we meet as we read this story are 2 Hebrew midwives called Shiphrah. Have I said that right? Shiphrah and Pua. Now these 2 ladies are Hebrew midwives. Now in the writing of the Bible, it's not clear whether the Hebrew is referring to their nationality, i.e. they're one of the Hebrew people who happen to be midwives, or if they might be Egyptian women who are midwives to the Hebrew people. Does that make sense? It doesn't really matter either way, but it's unclear whether these ladies are Hebrews people or not. But they did something incredible. Can I have... These are all women in this story, so could I have a lady to come and just hold this up the front here while Heather's got them? All right. So these 2 people, what did they do that was incredible? Well, the king of Egypt at that time was really trying to push down these Hebrew people. And they came up with this incredible idea that let's kill all the boys when they're born. I just going, this is nuts how far this Pharaoh took his, fear and hatred against the Hebrew people. But what Shiphrah and Puah was doing, were going, this is wrong, and we need to stand up against this. And so when the Hebrew boys were born, they didn't kill them. Now, could you just imagine, this is the most powerful person in Egypt telling them, you have to do this. And they said, no. So he calls them into the palace, onto his turf, where he is most powerful, and had these two women stand before him and say, why are you doing this? How did they respond? Were they fearful? No, they lied to his face. They said, these women, these women are good. They give birth and they're out of there before we even turn up. That's why we can't kill these boys. So not only are they in the most powerful place, speaking to the most powerful person, but they're still standing up against him. Still saying, we are not going to do what you are asking us to do. Finally, this line in the Bible says that God was so pleased with the way they were standing up that he gave them families of their own. What do we think that means? That these women didn't have children and God blessed them with children? Possibly, I don't know. They got married? Possibly. I read something during the week that it said maybe the Hebrew people brought them in and accepted them as one of their own. Like if they were, say, Egyptian ladies who were the midwives to the Hebrew people, that they were suddenly brought in and they discovered this larger family that they suddenly belonged to because of the stand that they took. I don't know, you can read it different ways, but I quite like that last one. So here's the first amazing woman. We're going to see another one right now. Could I have another amazing woman to hold this up the front here? Anyone? Here we go. We've got Moses' mother. Around this time, if we keep reading the Bible reading, we find that a Hebrew person got pregnant and had birth to a boy. Now, technically, if you give birth to a boy, you're supposed to now throw it in the river. Moses' mother didn't do that. These women, they keep on standing up against the Pharaoh, don't they? They keep on saying, no, this is not right. So she tries to hide Moses away, but eventually it gets to a point where this becomes impossible. I'm imagining what? About the 12-month mark? I don't know. I don't know when that would happen. When can you not hide a baby away? Oh, she hid him for 3 months. I should read the Bible, shouldn't I? Thanks, Jody. So she hid him for 3 months, and you know the story. Placed him in the river. But can you imagine what that would have been like for a mother? To go, I don't know what to do here. The only thing I can do, because I love my child so much, is to put him in a basket in the river and hope for the best. It is just hard to wrap your head around what Moses' mother was going through here. But this story, this part of the story, you find the next amazing woman. Did I have another amazing woman to step up for this one? We have Miriam. These are unnamed in this story. They're named later. But we find Miriam, which is Moses' sister, who we find is sitting at a distance to see what would happen. Why is she doing this? Is it because she loves Moses? Well, the one who has become Moses loves her brother? Possibly, although she would have been jealous because, I don't know, baby boys back there were valued more than baby girls. And so she might have gone, well, why is he getting all the special treatment and I'm just here? Maybe it's because she loved her mother and saw the distress, saw the weight of what was happening on her mum and said, look, I need to make sure that I see what's happening here. So she's beside the river to see what happened. And along comes the last of it. Here's the next one. We have another amazing woman. There we go. Now we have Pharaoh's daughter who approaches the river, who finds the baby. And it's interesting when you do read the Bible, like we should, it says here, she goes immediately, this is one of the Hebrew babies. So Pharaoh's daughter knows straight away that this is a Hebrew baby, not an Egyptian baby. She knows her father's rule. What should she do? Throw him in the Nile River and drown him. She doesn't do that either. So this is another person who is standing up against this rule, saying, no, I'm not going to do what I'm supposed to do because it's not right. I'm going to stand up against this as well. And then a whole series of things happen here. Moses' sister jumps back in and approaches the princess, which is a bit dangerous to do because if you approach royalty without being invited, technically you get killed. And so she approaches the princess and says, shall I go and find a wet nurse for this baby? She says yes. And so Moses' sister goes and gets Moses' mother. And so Moses' mother actually ends up being paid to look after her own baby. And I'm sure that Shafira and Pure were very happy with the whole situation. Here is my question to you. You just heard the story. You've got these four different amazing women who stood up for what was right. But each one of them had to take a risk to do that. Each one of them, really did step out in standing up for what was right. If I asked a question, which is a question that I might ask when I'm teaching my scripture kids at school, if we were going to rank these four groups of women from 1 to 4 on how hard it was to stand up for what was right. How hard was it for them to do that? Because each of them faced consequences for what they did. Shafir and Pure were facing consequences from Pharaoh. Moses' sister and Moses' mother had to give up a lot in what they were doing and the risks that they took. And Pharaoh's daughter was also taking risks of going against her father and ultimately adopting a Hebrew boy as her own son is a risk. I'm going to give you 90 seconds to talk with the people around you. We're going to talk up the front here. Then I want you to move these people around from 1 to 4 on how big of a risk that they took in standing up for what was right. Got the idea? Once again, you know that story very well. And I'm not quite sure if I can say anything that you might not have already heard at Sunday school, at scripture lessons at school, or in sermons that you've heard on that passage. But I'm just going to give you 3 observations that I reflected on as I read that passage during the week. Firstly, for me, this story spoke of encounter, which is why I've got that title over everything today. And I think that Moses encountered 3 different things in the story. Firstly, Moses encountered God. There was an invitation to come close and to be with God. One of the things that I did find interesting in this is that this invitation wasn't forced upon Moses. It wasn't like Paul in the blinding light when he was riding to Damascus and, he didn't have a choice. He was suddenly, hit by this light. It wasn't like that with Moses. The story was that he noticed a bush that was burning, which apparently wasn't that unusual back then because of lightning and other stuff. There's a fire over there. The difference was that the bush wasn't burning up. And that's what intrigued Moses. Not that the bush was on fire, it wasn't burning up. And it says, I'll go over there and check that out because this is unusual. It's not burning up. And the reading that Lucille read out says that as Moses drew close, that is when God called out, Moses, Moses. So God didn't enforce this encounter. Moses could have just kept walking. But rather, there was that invitation, draw close, see what's going on, see what's here, See that God is present. I think that's the same for us. I don't think, well, there are times that God will impose on us, but a lot of the time God just invites us to draw close, invites us to have that encounter, and leaves the rest up to us. I wonder whether we have that same inquisitive nature like Moses did and go, I'm going to draw close just to see what's going on here. I'm going to draw close to see and experience and encounter the presence of God. The second part, which is already up on the screen, is that Moses encountered a calling. It's funny, in the Old Testament in particular, the call stories are all the same. That God invites somebody to do something in the mission of God, and the person doubts and says, I can't do that, and God says, yes, you can, because I'm with you. It doesn't matter if it's Isaiah or Jeremiah or, you can go through the whole lot. It seems to be the same pattern, and Moses fits into that pattern. There's this initial doubt, I think you've got the wrong person, God. I can't do this, and God says, yes, you can, because I am with you. I am with you. But in this case, God had heard the lament of the people who are still crying out, how long? God says, I've heard that, and I need you to help me in that response. I need you to be part of the solution. I would be interested to do a little bit of further study myself and see how many of these callings throughout the Old Testament revolved around a sense of standing up for what was right or standing against an injustice. That God's saying, this is not right. I need to intervene because I'm being asked to do this. You are part of the solution. I don't know that complete answer. As I said, I'd love to do a little bit more study on that. But the last thing that I reflected upon was this idea that Moses encountered family. It's not worded terribly well. I couldn't get that line right, but that's the closest one I've got. That there was a sense of family being here. That Moses, in his doubt, says, what would happen if I get there and they say, what is the name of the one who has sent you? Did anyone think that's a bit of an unusual question for Moses to be asking? If you've gone there to help the people who've been oppressed for so many years, do you think they're going to say, and what was his name? However, Kevin, in his sermon last week, when he was talking about the struggle or the wrestle with Jacob, Jacob is wrestling with this angel or God, or however you want to understand that. What was Jacob's question in the middle of that wrestle? Do you remember from last week? What is your name? Jacob asked the same question. What is your name? Why is this so important to the people back in that time? There's something about, if I know your name, then I know who you are. If I know your name, then I know where you fit in. If I know your name, I can trust what you are saying. Now, did Jacob actually get an answer last week when he said, what is your name? No, he did not. God did not answer that question, or the angel, or however you want to understand who he was wrestling with, did not answer that question. Yet in this case, when Moses says, what do I tell them, what is your name? God does give an answer of sorts. We have that classic answer, I am who I am. Okay, that says a lot. I could go much more into that. I did read a lot about what that actually meant, but I thought that's not for today. I actually liked the second part of what he said. After he said, I am who I am, he went on to say, I am the God of your fathers, or I am the God of your family. I'm the God of Abraham. I'm the God of Isaac. I'm the God of Jacob. I am the God of the people that you call family. And then goes on to say, it's not only for you, it's for all the generations to come after you. I am part of your family. You are part of my family. We are family. And that is why when you go to them and they say, who's helping us? You can say, family. The God who is our family's God has responded. I don't know, there's something in that really stirred me. We've been talking about how God's family is understood through the Old Testament. And at this point, God reminds Moses that he is part of the family, that the people are part of the family. And that's part of the reason why they're responding. And I guess we need to hear this morning that we are part of the family too.